Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, Volquest's own Austin Price. Austin, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chase. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I don't know if are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm guy? I just did the Larry David. Pretty good. But you probably don't get that reference.
I'm not. But hey, I get it's popular.
It is popular. I mean, you're a Seinfeld guy, right?
A little bit. I couldn't recite episodes. I was never big into Friends or Seinfeld, but I would watch it if it's on. It's funny. But I was never big on the must-see TV. Outside of Wings, I was a big Wings guy back in the 90s. Big Wings guy.
My parents are big Wings guys, or guys and gals, I guess I should say. Like that was on around. I don't know if they're still on, but it's always a good. Like there's a certain amount of shows where if I pop in, go back home, and I just walk in the living room, like everybody loves Raymond, Wings, Cheers. Certain shows that are very much on the table to be on the television at any given moment.
Nantucket, baby.
There you go. I mean, I got Matlock behind me.
Lowell, Antonio, Helen, Faye.
Goodness gracious. There you go. Well, Austin, we've got a lot of Tennessee recruiting stuff that I wanted to run by. No percentages today, Austin Price. We're still months out on the percentage game in terms of Tennessee recruiting, but I am curious. Some things just kind of broad strokes, some kind of getting into the weeds here a little bit. But my first question to you, because we haven't talked in a while, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and you being the expert on this has me really curious. And now that we have 4 years going on 5 of recruiting boards for Tennessee since Josh Heupel arrived, in what ways has Tennessee's recruiting board changed in the 2026 cycle from previous years that you've seen?
I don't think they're recruiting the state of Texas or the state of Florida nearly as hard as they were back when Heupel first got here. Not to say they don't recruit them. I still think they're dabble in Texas. I don't see them play in Florida a whole lot at all.
Yeah.
Compared to when he first got here. I think he just thought, well, I'm coming from Central Florida, we'll use what we got, Then I think he realized, it's going to be harder to pull kids from that state. So why waste a ton of resources? So they'll dabble in those states, but you see them heavily in Virginia, heavily in North Carolina, obviously Georgia, Mississippi, they're trying to be a big player for TK. The Keys kid and Tristan Keys is right up there, as the top priority for uncommitted players at the wide receiver position. And, I think they're trying to stay more regional and then dabble nationally. If they find a guy in Arizona, if they find a guy in Nevada, California, they're certainly going to recruit them. But it's not where they're trying to plant the flag, so to speak.
Yeah, the Florida thing, it's funny. It's like, I feel like Heupel should have just asked you and Brent about that one of like, hey, Florida kids just like, it's not a good track record there. You might be from UCF and all that, but Florida kids and Tennessee recruits just never really works.
Well, there was people in the building that have been around that, that did say that to begin with. And I'm not sure it resonated at first, but I think after a year or so, it resonated pretty well. And, that's why I think you've seen them really up the ante in North Carolina.
Yeah.
They've tried to be a player in South Carolina some. Mm-hmm. So, and obviously they've had success in the state of North Carolina the last several years.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia's always going to be there, right? Like the Georgia battle. I mean, it doesn't help.
Everybody recruits that state.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's just such a melting pot. There's so many kids and so many, you got Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, South Carolina, Tennessee, that are all, Florida State that loves to recruit South Georgia. All those schools are right there near the border of Georgia in some form or fashion. So they're always going to be diving into the Peach State. And Georgia, because of their success, they've recruited nationally more. So they don't get every top player in the state of Georgia. So there's some gettable guys in the Peach State.
I mean, Tennessee's gotten the number one receiver in the state of Georgia in back-to-back years now with Smith and Mike Matthews. So, I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, they won big battles. Christian Gass obviously won. They fought to the end with Georgia. So Tennessee wins their fair. Like you always say, you got to get your fair share in the state of Georgia with just it being a border state, regardless of how difficult it is to go up against Kirby and the Dogs right now. I mean, The thing, and this is kind of like a big picture recruiting, just blueprint question I have for you, Austin, is that like part of the reason that Georgia and like Atlanta just growing the way it is. I mean, 7A football in the state of Georgia is different than a lot of but just about anywhere else in the country outside of Texas. And it's a bunch of metropolitan area schools. I mean, it includes the biggest county I grew up in, Gwinnett County, but it also has the powerhouses in South Georgia, the Lowndes of the world that have just like these crazy facilities, kind of like those Texas facilities, all grouped together. And my question, like when I think about Tennessee's ability to stack top 5 classes in the future, if that ever becomes a possibility, it's like I think they need Nashville to continue to get bigger and better in terms of just more and more talent, with Nashville just growing at the rate that it is. Do you agree that Tennessee kind of needs Nashville to continue to grow and become more of a melting pot at the high school ranks, or is there a different kind of path to Tennessee having the kind of high school blue chip talent that Georgia has?
I don't think it'll ever get to where Georgia's got it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think the population for the state equates the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it can continue to get better. It's gotten infinitely better the last 15 years. And so, I think the more that you see Nashville grow, the more, businesses that roll in there that bring, families from other states, kids may not grow up in this state, for 18 years before picking Tennessee. But if you can get them in here for a handful of years,
Mm-hmm.
you certainly can, show them what the power of the state is. And then all of a sudden, they kind of become pseudo Tennesseans in a lot of ways. So again, it's about getting the players, that fit you. It's about getting the players that you want, not the players with the best rankings, because rankings are flawed. The rankings are skewed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with them. I didn't agree with them when we were rivals. I don't agree with them when we were on 3. Some of them I agree with 100% on. Some of them I'd shake my head at and go, what are you saying? But I'll also be the first to tell you, I'm not a great evaluator of talent. I can sit there and watch a kid live and go, yeah, that kid can go. That kid can move. He's shifty. He's fast. But watching film, I am not good at that. That's a gift that I do not have. But like once I see them in person, I do feel like I can determine pretty quickly whether a kid, can play at this level or not. But watching film, 2 totally different things. So, for Tennessee, it's about watching film. It's about being able to see them live. It's about getting more and more players in this state and growing and becoming, a deeper state, and then getting the players you truly want. You're going to offer a handful. You're going to offer a handful of those kids that you offer that, you're not going to end up wanting. You just offered to kind of get in the game, and then you decided you don't want them. It's about getting the players you truly want. What's your percentage of guys that you truly want? Since Josh Heupel's been here, after the 22 class, where basically they went over because of the sanctions and stuff from the previous regime, they've hit, I would say, at least 80% of the guys they want. Like they've missed very few. They've missed a few, but it's been very few. And so they've done a nice job of keeping the best players that they truly want in the state.
And also retention, right? Like then the other thing is like not only have they got them, they, especially this past cycle, did a really good job of retaining the guys they want and showed that their retention strategy has been wise, especially on like with what you saw in the secondary last year, with just the big exodus of guys where we kind of raised an eyebrow, and they were just fine, and they were right to bet on their just kind of their evaluations and who they brought in-house and being able to replicate or even build off what those guys did previously. Is there a Boo Carter in the 26 class for you? And what I mean by that is Boo was your lone true freshman starter last year on Tennessee's CFB team. This year, it just feels obvious that David Sanders kind of fits that bill, a Boo of like if you had to look at one true freshman to make a Boo kind of impact, it's just makes the most sense for it to be David Sanders at right tackle. Is there anyone on your radar who fits that bill the best, of like if you had to look in your crystal ball here, Austin is most likely to be a true freshman starter in 26 for Tennessee?
Man, that's a good question. Depending on how the quarterback battle shakes out, you might say Faizon, but I think that's going to be such a hotly contested thing. Who knows how many twists and turns that thing's got in it once, you get to next spring and then next fall camp. I don't know. That's a great question, Chase. You look at a guy like Tristan Keys, can he be that guy? But here's the deal. If Mike Matthews has a really good year, he's going to be set up. Where's Travis Smith at in year 2? And then Braylon Staley. And so, I don't know. That's a really good question. And again, that's way down in the weeds as far as trying to prognosticate that. When you first started asking me that, when I think of Boo Carter, I think of Tennessee, maybe, they weren't sure on the size. Then they watched him play, and it was no question that they were all in on Boo Carter. I think the same thing with Craig Tutt. I think Craig Tutt's got some it to him at Oakland. Again, I'm not calling him to be a starter in 26, but I think he's one that, Tennessee needs to try to get that one done, not let it drag out. It's not that they're slow playing, because I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I just don't think Tennessee's like super pushed hard either, right? I don't think they've just tried to say, all right, let's get in this thing. Let's get in let's end this thing. Not get in this thing. They're in it. Have been. But let's end this thing. And, I think if they do that, I think they'll be really, really happy that, that they don't let it become like Daune Morris did a year ago, where you kind of recruited him, you kind of did, and you were wanting a bigger back, then you decided to go all in on Daune Morris, and you're able to overcome it because he was committed to Southern Cal. And the kid didn't really want to go to LA. Let's face it, he didn't want to go to LA. There's no guaranteeing that Craig Tutt doesn't commit somewhere more regionally, and it's a little harder to flip one like that. So get that one done early this year. That's where I'm at with it. But again, that's my opinion.
Both Oakland kids too, right? Like, isn't Craig Tutt an Oakland kid too?
That's correct.
Yeah, you don't want to start that with one of the powerhouses in the state of Tennessee is slow playing one of the powerhouses.
I don't think they're slow playing, and they're recruiting him fairly hard. I just think that it's not been where they've just said, hey man, we want you to get in the boat right now. We want to get this thing over with. We need you to be part of the cat class early. I don't think those conversations have happened. I like Sam, but again, not my decision.
You're in on Craig Tutt. I wonder too how much of it is like safety is so weird because they end up flipping Timothy Merritt late, and Timothy Merritt was just he looks like he could be a big guy. Clearly, it seems like Tim Banks is in on Timothy Merritt, and we'll see at safety where things are with guys like Idris Farouk, who might be positioned to have a big year. And we've seen a lot of transfers, like you saw Will Brooks as a walk-on. We've seen a lot of different guys in that safety room, but they haven't brought in a blue chipper yet. Like, no one's been a quote unquote 4-star, and Shady Hayward just hurt. Like, that was a punch to the stomach for a lot of Vol fans.
It was a punch to the stomach for the staff. I mean, that's one that they did a really nice job on, but I mean, he had people around him that, that wanted to go to Florida for a little bit more money. And, I'm not sure that kid had a lot of say in it. Now, he would probably tell you differently because it's easy to say that, but in the moment, I think that, outside influences pushed him to Gainesville. And I mean, hey, that's part of the game. There have been times where outside influences that push kids to Knoxville. So that's part of the game and part of the things you have to battle in recruiting. That was before NIL, and it'll continue with NIL as all that stuff shakes out.
Yeah, I think safety is the only spot where they haven't added a 4-star kid in the Heupel era. I think it's the only one they haven't had one. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some kids that are going to play in safety that were 4 stars.
That's true.
That so that's kind of how I look at it, right? I mean,
yeah,
like what you are, what somebody sees you as, as a recruiting analyst, and what you play in college, 2 different things. So what are you, star wise? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if 3, 4, 5. I mean, how many guys are running around the NFL that were no stars? They just developed,
Where do you think the Vols have to target the most due to the position room numbers going into next year in this 26 class? What positions do they have to hit the hardest?
I mean, I think you got to continue to hit interior defensive line. I think secondary is important. I think wide receiver is important. Obviously, they've already got 2, committed, with Evans and King. You like where you're at with the tight end spot. You love Carson Sneed. You already have your quarterback. Running back is important. I think Tennessee would love to hit Savion Hiter. That's the one that, like, to me, that's the white whale out there is Savion Hiter. I mean, Tennessee can try to be a player for Latimer. I think they're in it for the Walton kid pretty deep. Latimer feels like he's headed to the Big Ten, but Savion Hiter is the one that I think, Darrell Sims, if you tied him down and said, which one do you really want? You have to tell me. I think he would say Savion Hiter is my guy.
The Hiter thing is interesting to me, Austin. I wonder if it's the same to you, where I think we haven't seen Tennessee invest at running back in a way that I would assume, have to invest in Hiter. And that's just such with how they operate in terms. Last year, it just felt like an anomaly with Dylan Sampson having to be the bell cow back, because we haven't seen that in the previous 3 years. And it feels like the rotation is more of what Tennessee would like to do.
Yep.
Like, does it make sense to go all in on like a Savion Hiter back? And it kind of like, when you think about just not salary cap, but just roster allocation, like it is kind of, that one has just raised an eyebrow for me, where I am kind of surprised, because Tennessee has just done so well at rotating so many guys there. That do you go big on Hiter, and does that make the most amount of sense?
Well, I think they certainly are going to go big.
Yeah.
And if they miss there, then they'll pivot and go in another direction. But I think they're certainly going to go there. Listen, I think you evaluate each class different. You evaluate each kid different. If you feel like this is a true game changer at tailback, and it's hard to think, it's not like Dylan Sampson came in with all this star power behind him. He just was a really good football player, and he broke records that were 100-year-old records. So that's why I never get super caught up in like the whole rankings thing. Don't get me wrong, you need good players. You can't just roll with a bunch of 3 stars and everything's gonna be okay. Like that's not real either. But I don't judge every kid that's a 3-star going, he's a 3-star. I think every kid's built different. And look at James Pierce was a 3-star until he wasn't, and then he ended up as a 5, by on 3. So and if he gets drafted in the first round this year, then that 5th star was warranted by Charles Power. So we'll kind of see where it goes. But I think with Savion, man, if you like him that much, you go after him.
I've been curious. You mentioned the North Carolina thing, Austin, and what I've been, I guess, there's still a lot of time here before we really see what ramifications, I guess, there are, if any. But from what you've gathered on the trail here, Austin, has Bill Belichick's arrival at UNC made any difference thus far to the inroads that Tennessee's made in the state of Tennessee? Because, they're just going and getting the number 1 player year over year, David Hobbs, Faizon Brandon. Do you see an interruption there a little bit, or no?
To this point, I'm not seeing any interruption. I think it's going to be a flashy object for in the short term, and we'll see if Bill Belichick can win, and we'll see how long he sticks around. He says that the whole Don Shula record's not that important to him. I think it is. It would be to me. Heck, if I was 20-something wins away, you're 3 years from becoming the all-time wins leader in the NFL. I would want that. Just because I would want to walk out of that thing with the most Super Bowl wins and the most wins period. And it's not, getting that record doesn't change, his status or anything like that. But once you've coached that long, why not try to go after it? So how long does he stick around, and then how quick can he have success? If he has quick success, and in this era, you can flip it a little easier because you're able to go out and go to the portal and add players and see what happens. But in the ACC, let's face it, is fairly weak. So, it's ripe for the picking if you're Bill Belichick.
Yeah. Next up here, Austin. This is something I didn't think we would ever see again, but it seems like it's a distinct possibility. I want to get it from your perspective. When we looked at Georgia's quarterback room, when they had Brock Vandagriff, Gunnar Stockton, and Carson Beck waiting behind Stetson, we all kind of looked at that and go, that's kind of an anomaly. Like Gunnar, grew up a Georgia fan.
It was dumb, and it proved to be dumb. It proved to be dumb for it's proved to be really dumb for Vandagriff, who's now retired out of football. It proved to be dumb, in a lot of ways for Stockton to this point. Now, again, if Stockton is the guy, if he wins the job, he'll have to compete against the Puglisi kid, or however you say his last name.
Yep.
If he's the guy, then obviously it was worth the wait. But that loading the room you're just not going to stick around that long. And I think where you're going is how does Tennessee go with a loaded room?
Yeah.
After this year, let's say, Nico's done at the end of the year, which, everybody expects him to be, and off to the NFL, then you go into next year with a 3-man race for the job.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is where does Jake Merklinger think he's at? Does he think he's got a real shot to win the job? Does he like his chances? How does he perform this fall when given an opportunity? Taven Jackson never gave himself that shot. He played the fraction of a game, and then, saw Nico throw it and knew Nico was coming in with the big NIL deal and said, I'm headed to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Merklinger at when he watches George for the next 9 months, when he sees, Faizon come in here and throw it, at bowl practice and then head into spring? Where is he at? Does he feel like, he's got a real shot? If he does, then you're looking at a 3-man race going to spring. Well, as I said on the board when they were talking about David Sanders versus Larry Johnson, like, they're going to keep the older guy engaged and ahead of the younger guys through spring. They don't want anybody knee-jerking and leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just how that works across all positions and all sports. That's not a football thing. That's every sport thing.
Yeah.
And so, but guess what? Players, they're in those meeting rooms. They're in those practice sessions. They see the talent of others. And so, does he feel like he's got a real shot? If he does, then you're looking at a 3-man race going through spring all the way into fall camp. And it'll be the first time we've had a real quarterback competition around here in a while.
And we haven't seen anything like that in a long time. Like 3 legitimate blue chip options at Tennessee. And I mean, that's if they don't even take a transfer. And that, I mean, it's way too early to forecast, but I mean, true freshman, that's a lot to put on Faizon, especially depending on how this year goes. If you're back-to-back CFP teams and then to just put that on a true freshman, regardless of how high you are on him, that's interesting. I mean, if like, it's just the dominoes are so potential, right? Because are so interesting because if certain guys win the job, that drastically changes things in so many different ways.
Well, it does. If Faizon wins it, then George and Merklinger are both going to be out.
They're both gone. Yeah,
you're left with a true freshman, and then what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a pecking order here. I mean, and then if George wins it, Merklinger's gone. Faizon, is he sticking around? Does he think he's getting past George in time? Where's he at mentally? I mean, like, quarterbacks are a weird, tricky domino, and how you handle them can really determine where the program goes, good or bad.
Final one here for you, Austin. Outside of Sanders, who do you think, looking into the future, Vol fans will come to find winning this particular battle in 2025 was a big deal for Tennessee? Daune Morris.
Yeah, I'm going to be bullish on him. I just think he's got some it to him. I love his personality. I think he's going to be a good one. And, maybe it's not this fall because they've got a decent room there, but I think he's going to be bullish to try to get on the field. I think Tennessee's going to be happy they won the battle for Travis Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tennessee's going to be happy they won the battle for Isaiah Campbell and Ethan Utley. And, and then I think they're going to be really happy for they won the battle for Faizon Brandon. I like this class a lot.
Do you think it's the most talented thus far as a whole?
I do. I think most talented overall. I will tell you another sneaky good one, and he's my under the radar. He's not going to play this year, in my opinion, just because they're loaded on the guard. I really am bullish on Anthony Ogamoro. I think he's going to be like this under the radar sleeper kid that when you look up in 3 years, you're going to go, man, I'm glad Tennessee saw that kid for what he is, because I think he's a really good player.
Is he a guard or a center?
Could play either one. I think he's a guard, though.
Okay. And he has some time to develop. I mean, you have the 2 transfers in Wendell Moy and Sam Pendleton who have a couple of years. And
it's hard, though, man. These kids don't want to develop. They want to play right away. I mean,
But even in the offensive line, I feel like that's the one where you have to know.
It's a developmental position, but kids are finicky, man. Like, they just – they struggle with it. And now that you add money into the mix and transfer portal and people behind the scenes are like, man, you can play here, you can play there. Let's go. Come on, let's get out of here. Like, it takes a disciplined kid to kind of weed out all the noise.
Well, it's kind of like what you said. Like, quarterback, you don't really have time to waste. It's kind of like you really got to get that right quickly. But you just need one good year of tape as an offensive tackle or a guard at Tennessee, and you could be an NFL draft guy. Like, you can wait on your body to develop and just only have a great year of tape on a good team, and then you're off to the pros. Like, it just, you don't need years of coverage. Like, I just feel like it's just a little bit different. And defensive line, you're rotating all the time. Garner's done a great job there, so they get to play early. Linebacker, they've rotated well. I just think offensive line, I don't know. I wonder how when they just recruit these kids, like, hey, look, like, you're in the SEC. The body type is not the same. Like, it's gonna take some time to get this down. But if you wait it out, like, all you need is a year. Like, you just need a year of good tape, and you can go off the NFL.
Well, maybe they'll bring you over and let them talk to the kids.
Oh, let me. Like, I have just Austin Price. Like, I just let me in there. I can solve Tennessee recruiting, playing time stuff. I can organize it for everybody involved.
No doubt about it.
Austin Price, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Volquest.com this week?
Well, got continued football coverage. The Vols are off on spring break. The kids are all out at the beach and doing their thing this week. They'll be back on the practice field next Tuesday. Then we'll have a lot of basketball coverage. Tennessee will be up in Lexington for the NCAA tournament. Robin Grant will have you covered. Eric Kane will be down in Tuscaloosa for the Vols and Tide. That's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, all of which you can catch at Volquest.com.
Austin Price, thank you so much for making the time. I greatly appreciate it. Go subscribe, Volquest.com, if you have not already today, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jake.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm now joined by Crimson Tide Sports Network play-by-play host, Tennessee's own, now Alabama's own, Roger Hoover. Roger, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Chase, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me on. I've been a huge fan of the podcast for years, so thank you.
Thank you, man. You do great work over there in Crimson Tide country, and I mean, are you an Alabaman? Is that what they call it? Like, there's a Tennessean. Are you an Alabaman at this point?
I think so. The funny thing is, I grew up in Kingsport, Tennessee, and obviously had family connections to Tennessee and the Vols, but my dad's family, half of it was Alabama. So, like, I always had a little bit of a rooting interest for Alabama, and when I was in school in Knoxville, I was kind of always known as the Alabama guy around the athletic department and the Vol Network and stuff. Now I get down here, and I'm known as the Tennessee guy. So I guess it was meant in the cards for me to spend time at both places with how I grew up.
There's a lot of crossover there, man. There's a picture of me. It's my Twitter profile header of, like, on the sideline, just at a Tennessee game in Neyland, because I grew up in Georgia, and this was like the mid 90s. I think it was a Vanderbilt, and I'm on the sideline in a North Georgia sweater on the Tennessee with Tennessee players behind them, and I went to University of North Georgia for undergrad and then Tennessee for my master. So it was just kind of like one of those things you don't think about in the time, but it all worked itself out. You like to think that you're making your own choices, but then somehow fate kind of guides you down certain paths, and you're like, wow, okay, well, it's just kind of funny that looking back on that photo of just me and then University of North Georgia stuff, and then at a Tennessee game on the sidelines and stuff, it's kind of wild, because that's what ultimately happened.
That's definitely good. Yeah. Fate has a funny way. The only three schools, I only applied to one school and got in, was Tennessee, but I sent my test scores to Carson Newman. Okay. I ended up working there for 2 years as a broadcaster and sports info guy. And then the other school was Alabama, just because it was kind of similar to Tennessee, big school feel. And here I am. I've worked for all three of them now. So it's been pretty crazy.
You even got the name Hoover, like they're like a Hoover, Alabama. The two-a-days factor here, Rush Probst.
Yeah, that's the town I live in now.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
So Hoover from Hoover. Yes, sir.
Bucks football, man. I was a religious two-a-days watcher growing up, and Vestavia Hills is over. Like, you got all kinds of stuff. Yeah, Alabama. Tennessee's dipping into the Alabama footprint still. Not sure how much over the next couple of years with Hugh Freeze and Kalen DeBoer manning the ship there, and it's getting harder and harder to pull kids out of the state of Alabama for Tennessee side of things. But that is for another day, Roger. We are here to talk about what is going to be a gigantic series this weekend in Tuscaloosa. It's actually the last time Tennessee lost a SEC series. It's kind of crazy that it's been over a year now since that has been the case. Tennessee sweeps Florida at home over this past weekend. They're the last remaining undefeated team, the best start for any defending national champion in baseball history. The accolades for Tony Vitello and company just keep stacking up. But I am very excited to have what I think will be a very, very difficult series for Tennessee to win. Like, you just kind of take it for granted that you're like, all right, the run rule is fun, but like when Tennessee just run rules Florida out of nowhere in the 7th after a great showing from Marcus Phillips, you're like, dang, All right. Well, I thought we were gonna have another great ending to this game, and it just like, oh, it got ugly in a hurry, and you don't even finish it. And this is against a top 10 team, a really good team in Florida. And now you have this weekend where Tennessee had a lot of problems last year. Like that was an early kind of wake up call test for Tennessee, and it seems like Alabama, this version is better than what Tennessee saw last year in Tuscaloosa. And I think on the outside looking in at this Alabama team, Tennessee's going to have their hands full, right?
Yeah, it's been a really good start to the year for the Crimson Tide. This is Rob Vaughn's second year leading this program after he was great at Maryland, won the Big Ten a few times, Big Ten tournament. He has really rebuilt this roster even more so than he did a year ago. And I feel like now that he got to coach a full season in the SEC and see just how tough those 10 weekends stacked upon each other are, I feel like he knows a little more what he's looking for in his team. And he's got a group that's really gritty and tough and kind of feels like they've been overlooked either before in their college baseball careers. We have a lot of JUCO transfers, guys like Brendan Norton, who is at Jacksonville State for a few years, Jason Torres, who never really got a chance to play every day at the University of Miami. They've come to Alabama and they've had an opportunity. So Rob Vaughn now in his second year leading this program after he was excellent at the University of Maryland, winning several Big Ten titles, tournament titles. Last year in the SEC, had a lot of holdovers from the previous team that made it to a super regional against Wake Forest, but lost a lot of position players and then reloaded some in the transfer portal, but maybe didn't hit on as many prospects as he has so far this year. So I feel like just him being around the SEC, coaching those 10 grueling weekends stacked on top of each other, he kind of now knows what kind of player to look for, either in the transfer portal or even bringing in some young talent, signing them from the high school ranks. And it's just been a remarkable start to the year. Alabama did not lose a game until last Sunday against Presbyterian, but then backed it up with 4 wins on the road at UAB in a midweek game last Tuesday in a game that was tied going to the top of the ninth. A couple of home runs get the win there, and then the same script followed in Bryan College Station against A&M, winning thrilling ball games on Friday with a couple of clutch home runs there, and then on Saturday, grand slam home run by Will Hodo before finally closing it out on Sunday to get a sweep. First time Alabama started SEC play with a road sweep in 52 years. You have to go all the way back to 1973, the last time this group has done that. So off to a tremendous start, 20 wins, only 1 loss on the year, and everyone's pretty optimistic about the future of this team in 2025.
When you think about what you thought about this team preparing for this season, Roger, did you expect this kind of hot start where, I mean, they look like one of the SEC's best this year? It kind of feels like they're this year's Kentucky in a way, where I think Kentucky, people were just always raising an eyebrow regardless of how much they were winning. And they're like, all right, it's a different style. They play a lot of small ball, but it's Kentucky. It's like, it's just not been their tradition in baseball to be really good. But they gave Tennessee a lot of problems in Lexington last year, and they were obviously a College World Series team. They were a really good team last year, and they just kind of had to continue to win to earn the respect of a lot of SEC baseball fanatics. And I feel like Alabama's at this point in that same realm where it's like, I think Bama is a really good team, and I think they are someone that could absolutely win this series against Tennessee, and for sure give Tennessee their first loss of the weekend. But I just think it's always going to be, there's going to be a wait and see approach throughout this year with Alabama, is like, because just they're not the traditional, like everyone thinks LSU, like even after sweeping A&M that we'll get to here in a second, it was preseason number 1, it's just having the season of just you know what. And you look at around LSU and Tennessee, and you look at the top, I mean, even Georgia's getting a lot of more respect, I feel like, from SEC fans than Alabama to this point. But I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think Alabama's legit. What when you think back to what this team was before the year, did you see this kind of run coming to start it?
Not necessarily this win and loss record. I thought they would be a better team than a year ago, mainly because they're more athletic in the outfield, and I think that helps you save runs when your team is pitching. And then just getting from first to third, even opening weekend when Alabama played against Bradley, like we were just stunned. Like Alabama's getting first to third on the base paths way more than they did a year ago. Alabama was kind of station to station, kind of always waiting on the 3-run homer a year ago. It's not necessarily been the case this year. They just look so much more athletic. And then on the mound, many different options they can go to, especially out of the bullpen. It just looks different on different days. Even the starting rotation, you start with a good lefty in Zane Adams. You followed up with a power right-hander in Riley Quick. And then after that, Bobby Alcock, who has a true 4-pitch mix as the Sunday starter. It's just a different look every time you go there with the starting pitchers. Every time you go to the bullpen, a lot of good righty versus lefty options. Last year, it kind of seemed like Alabama had the same kind of right-hander over the top, fastball, slider, changeup. Now it's all over the place. The closer goes at a submarine, like sidearm angle Carson Osmer. Like, he's really fun to watch. Some really good lefties out of that bullpen too, that again, the Crimson Tide just didn't have a year ago. So I saw a good start to the season coming. I didn't necessarily see this win and loss record because weekend number 2, they played in the Jacksonville Baseball Classic at actually the old ballpark I used to work at, home of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, where they were able to pick up wins against Coastal Carolina and then NC State. I thought that NC State win was a really good victory against a team that went to the College World Series a year ago. Sunday, they're falling behind 10-0 to Ohio State early in that ball game. And you're kind of like, okay, we kind of won our marquee game of the week against NC State. That's fine. This group found a way to rally back from down 10-0 and win on a walk-off 3-run homer by Will Hodo. A lot of it was set up by a pair of 3-run bombs by Justin Lebron in that game, as he kind of let everybody know in college baseball that he might be one of the 2 or 3 best players in the sport right now. So I didn't necessarily see this win-loss record coming, but I saw a much better team. And in my mind, I'm always kind of thinking of, okay, how's this group going to look in Hoover for the SEC tournament? How are they going to compete in a regional? And now you kind of look and say, okay, there are many more options for this team to be successful in those type settings. And it's obviously paying off with some really good regular season success to begin the year.
Which matchup are you most fascinated by with this Tennessee-Alabama series this weekend? Is it a pitching matchup that you're most curious about? Is it a certain player on Alabama that's had a great start and you're just kind of curious how they match up against Liam Doyle and Marcus Phillips? And then we'll see who the Sunday starter will be for Tennessee this weekend. It's Tegan Kuhns last weekend, freshman. Maybe it's Kuhns again. We'll see. Not AJ Russell for at least until April. So Bama gets to avoid AJ Russell here this go around, and what could be just the Death Star of college baseball rotations if that ever comes to fruition this year. But is there one for you that you're most locked in on matchup wise for Tennessee Alabama?
Yeah, for me, it's probably Riley Quick, who will be starting the Friday game for Alabama. Just to see him go up against a lineup like this, and he's done really well, against Texas A&M, 5 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts. Now, that was supposed to be a good A&M lineup. They dealt with their injuries, lowest batting average currently in SEC baseball. But he not only pitched well against them, he pitched well against NC State in that game I referenced in Jacksonville earlier this season too. So he's coming off Tommy John surgery from a year ago. Alabama's slowly been bringing him along. He finally got to the mid-80s in his pitch count this past week in College Station. Now it's going to be really fun to see what he can do against a lineup like Tennessee's. He throws hard. So with that, sometimes come a lot of home runs hit by the other team. So can he keep a Tennessee team that likes to hit the ball out of the yard? Can he contain them? Can he keep them in the ballpark? I think that's a real key coming up for this series.
What is the biggest difference you've seen thus far from this year's Alabama team versus last year's?
The athleticism, I think, is what jumps out to me a little bit more. Fielding was really not Alabama's strong suit last year, and then on the base paths, just couldn't get much done. But like I mentioned before, this group's getting from first to third on base hits to left to right field a lot more often. And I just feel like, too, Justin Lebron continues to take a step forward as an all-around player. Not just, last year he was a great defensive player. We knew that. Was starting to hit for a high average, but only had 12 homers, 30-something RBI. He's already surpassed his power numbers already this season. He just generates so much power out of a really small, compact body. It has been amazing to watch his transformation really taking over this team. And then there are contributions all over the lineup, up and down the lineup. Will Plattner drove in a run that was key for Alabama on Sunday to get the sweep against A&M. He's batting 8th. He's one of your catching options. Richie Bonamolo Jr. batting 9th. At one point was 10 for 13 against North Dakota State a few weeks ago. That's in addition to what Bryce Fowler has done the leadoff spot each and every day, being consistent, getting on base to make sure Justin Lebron batting right behind him drives in runs. So I think the lineup is just really hard to beat, and there just aren't many weak points in that Alabama lineup, where I think before there were kind of predictable results with the lineup a year ago, but this year's been anything but predictable with this group. They've all had some really standout days at the plate.
So speaking of standout days at the plate, it's a guy that we've kind of danced around here, but I mean, you made the point of like he's definitely one of 2 or 3 best baseball players in college baseball this year. He has a fantastic star baseball player name in Justin LeBron. We saw him last year in this series, but he's made the leap this year from last year, where he was good last year. It looks like he is elite this year. What can you tell Tennessee folks about what they're in for with Justin LeBron this weekend and how much he's changed from the last time Tennessee saw him?
Well, the last time Tennessee saw him, it was his first ever taste of SEC baseball in that opening weekend, which Alabama did win, like you mentioned, but he wasn't as huge a factor in that series as some other guys in Alabama's lineup. But he's much more of a power hitter this year, in addition to being an outstanding defensive shortstop. I think that was always there for him before, but now the power numbers have really gone up, and I've had people that I've worked with on broadcast compare him to guys like Carlos Correa or Derek Jeter. I mean, he is getting about the most amount of attention you can have, and he's thrived on it. I think he's done interviews with every major college baseball media outlet that's out there, and the rest of the team is not even jealous by it. Like, they are embracing the fact that they're playing with a star player. I've been around teams where that is not necessarily the case in a lot of different sports, but this group certainly has, enjoyed seeing Justin LeBron get all the attention. Even Major League Baseball tweeted out, when he was able to hit those 2 homers against Ohio State and Jacksonville. Major League Baseball is making LeBron James memes and gifs, like kind of Alabama baseball Twitter only had been before, but now it's catching on throughout the entire country. So he's somebody that's really taken all this in stride. He's a quiet kid, humble as can be, but really hardworking, and he's still just a sophomore, and he's not a draft eligible sophomore. So hopefully he's got another year in Crimson to come because he's doing some special things, and he's the type of player that teams that go have a great run in the College World Series, like Tennessee with Christian Moore a year ago, you kind of have to have that player, and Alabama's lucky to have Justin LeBron at shortstop this year.
Final thing, we'll get you out of here, Roger. How do you think the series ultimately goes? Do you think Bama goes back-to-back and beating Tennessee in the series? Because it's kind of interesting. You're talking about the Friday night guy, because I was talking to Graham Hall of Swamp 247 last week previewing Tennessee, Florida, and he was ultimately right in terms of, like, with Liam Peterson, who was another first-round guy, and it was the battle of the Liams and Lindsey Nelson with Doyle and Peterson, and it was a battle to the end. I think Peterson really outdueled Doyle in that Friday night spot, and then Tennessee came through late and did enough to win that Friday night game, and then they run roll Florida obviously on Saturday and win on Sunday and come back. So they win all 3 games, but it was kind of like if Florida wins that first one and they're able to just sneak that in and get that first one, that the series felt like that was one Florida could build off of momentum there with their strong Friday night guy. Does that feel like it's got to be the case for Alabama, as they've got to take advantage on Friday night and win and just kind of like make it so they just have to split that Saturday, Sunday? Or do you think if Tennessee wins that Friday that it's like, this could be one of those other sweep situations that we just saw last weekend?
Yeah, I don't know, because a year ago, Tennessee thumped Alabama on Friday night, and then Alabama won kind of tight games the next 2 days. I think it's hard to tell at this point. I believe it'll go 2-1 either way, either Alabama or Tennessee. I hate to take the political answer, but I got to be a little political with it, having some ties with both Alabama and Tennessee. But I think it's a really, really good matchup coming up, and I think it's going to be fun to see on both sides who kind of emerges out of the bullpen and who has the best days out of the bullpen. That was a key advantage for Alabama this past weekend, getting their sweep against Texas A&M. Can they repeat that going up against a better lineup? I think that's really going to be fun to see. And can, the starting pitching that Alabama had, Zane Adams, Riley Quick, Bobby Alcock, can they come close to the performances they had a week ago? I'm not even going to say be as good, because Riley Quick, 5 scoreless innings, Bobby Alcock, 7 scoreless innings. It's hard to match that, especially against one of the best offenses in college baseball like Tennessee. So I think it's really fascinating matchups. As I told you before we recorded, this is actually the one series probably all year I won't get to do for Alabama, either on radio or SEC Network Plus. So I'm going to be keeping up with it with like all of you from afar, but it is going to be fun to watch and see kind of where these teams are. And then don't be surprised if we see this matchup again later down the road of the SEC tournament, possibly a super regional or in Omaha, because these are 2 Omaha caliber teams with what we've seen through the first 5 weeks of the year.
Absolutely. And they might not avoid each other on the hardwood either, Roger Hoover, because if Tennessee and Alabama both take care of business in their respective regions, they will meet in the Final Four if it comes to be. It's very much in play. So we might get Bama Tennessee Part 2 this year in the Final Four. That'd be fun. That would be a fun situation, Bama Tennessee.
Yeah, Nate Oates would like to have those 30 seconds back that he had at the Food City Center. I mean, and Alabama managed things much better a week later against Auburn to close out the second half and in overtime. So that definitely was an interesting result in Knoxville, and it's fun to see both Alabama and Tennessee being so elite in basketball, getting ready for March Madness.
Absolutely. Roger Hoover, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Crimson Tide Sports Network this week?
Yeah, we have a lot of social media content. We'll have some baseball content coming up for our Thursday show, Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, that streams live at 2 on all of our social media platforms at UA_CTSN. And then just a lot of coverage of all sports right now. I'm very focused on our men's and women's basketball teams that are gearing up for the NCAA tournament. And then, there's football around here too, I think. So we definitely have some spring football coverage. It's a very interesting spring for Alabama to try and find a new quarterback, possibly Tennessee native Ty Simpson. We'll be keeping an eye on that battle really all throughout the spring.
Ty Simpson season. It's here, Roger Hoover. That doesn't happen very often. I couldn't even remember. I don't remember the last Tennessee native. It was a starting quarterback at Alabama. Has that happened?
It's been a while. I'm sure it's happened at some point, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Roger Hoover, keep up the great work, my friend, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Enjoyed it, Chase. Thank you.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.